3 weeks after Priya Malhotra signed the lease on her new one-bedroom apartment, a padded envelope arrived from a furniture company she had never contacted. Inside was a financing offer, pre-approved, a $2,400 limit, her name spelled correctly, her new address printed above it. She had not filled out a form. She had not clicked an ad. She had signed a lease. That was enough. Somewhere between the leasing office and her mailbox, a change of address became a data point, and the data point became a target. Most people call this coincidence. It is not. There is a life event data pipeline that processes an estimated 1.5 million individual trigger events every week. New movers, newlyweds, new parents, the newly divorced, the newly bereaved. It does not wait for you to want something. It waits for something to happen to you. I am going to show you exactly how the calendar works and how you end up on the list before you have unpacked a single box. The belief is comfortable because it flatters you. You think of yourself as a deliberate buyer. You compare prices. You read reviews. You wait for a sale instead of paying full price the day you see something you like. When a major life event happens, a move, a wedding, a birth, a death in the family, you tell yourself that the spending which follows is simply logistics catching up with reality. You needed a couch because you have an apartment now. You needed a car seat because you have a child now. You needed a casket because you have a funeral to plan by Friday. The purchases feel necessary, not persuaded. And because you are the one signing the confirmation email, clicking the checkout button, handing over the card, it feels like your decision from start to finish, made on your own timeline, at your own pace, under your own judgment. It is a reasonable belief to hold most of the time. Financial advice built around impulse control assumes you are the variable that needs managing, that discipline is a trait you either have or do not. So you check your bank balance before big purchases. You sleep on decisions. That this is enough. This belief holds up fine in an ordinary week. You buy what you need, skip what you do not, and the small inefficiencies average out over a year of normal spending. It is the exceptional weeks that break the model. The week around a wedding date, a moving date, a due date, a funeral date. Those are precisely the weeks when your belief in your own steady judgment gets tested against a system that already knew the date before you told your own mother. Here is the crack. Priya's mother did not have the new address yet. Priya had not posted about the move online. She had not searched apartment furniture or browsed a single retailer in the 2 weeks around moving day. And yet the offer arrived within 9 days of her signing the lease, addressed correctly, timed precisely, priced to feel manageable rather than alarming. If the offer had come from a friend who happened to notice she was settling in, you would call it thoughtful. It came from a company that had never spoken to her in her life. Her first guess was the leasing office, the obvious suspect, the only company with her signature on that exact date. A quick email to the property manager ruled that out. Their privacy policy, for what it was worth, promised no third-party data sales, which left an uncomfortable question hanging over the rest of her week. If not the leasing office, then who and how many other companies already had the same file? The math does not work if this is coincidence. A generic mailer, sent blind to every household in a zip code, does not know your name or your move-in date. This one knew both. Something upstream of her mailbox already had the information. Knew she had moved, knew roughly when, knew where to send an offer that would still feel relevant 9 days later rather than 9 months later. That requires a pipeline, a source willing to sell, and a buyer willing to pay for speed. It requires someone profiting from the fact of her move before she had finished living it herself. That is the part that should sit uncomfortably. Not that a company wanted her business. Companies always want your business. It is that the moment her life changed, it changed on someone else's ledger before it changed in her own address book, and she had no idea the ledger existed. The mechanism is called life event trigger marketing inside the industry, though the plainer name is the emotional spending calendar. A running, continuously updated map of every major transition in your life, built and sold before you have had time to adjust to the transition yourself. Its origin is older than the internet. Direct mail marketers have used public records for decades. County deed filings when a house changes hands, marriage license registries at the courthouse, obituary listings in the local paper. A furniture store in the 1980s could pay a list broker for the names of everyone who had bought a home in the past 30 days and mail them a catalog before the moving truck had even been unloaded. The mechanism is not new. What changed is the speed, the coverage, and the number of events it now tracks. The modern version runs on a small number of core data feeds, aggregated by companies most people have never heard of. Deed and mortgage filings from more than 3,000 courthouses nationwide flag new homeowners the day the paperwork records. The United States Postal Service licenses its National Change of Address database, the same list you update when you forward your mail, to private data companies who resell it as a near real-time feed of every household that has moved. Utility hookups, new phone lines, and subscription address changes add a second layer for renters who do not appear in deed records at all. Wedding and baby registries, often filled out voluntarily on retailer websites, add a third, an explicit, self-reported announcement of an upcoming trigger event, time-stamped months in advance. Layered together, these feeds classify roughly 1.5 million individual households into life event categories every week: pre-movers, new movers, newlyweds, expecting parents, new parents, the recently divorced, the recently bereaved, new retirees, new graduates. Once a household is tagged, speed becomes the entire game. Industry data on non-credit triggers, the movers and the newly married rather than the loan applicants, shows response rates falling 30 to 40% for every week that passes after the triggering event. A furniture offer that converts well 9 days after a move converts far worse at 90 days, because by 90 days the apartment is furnished, the decision already made, the moment closed. So the infrastructure is built for velocity. Some vendors advertise moving a credit trigger from data receipt to a live campaign within hours, and a household trigger, a move or a birth, from data receipt to market within a single day. The entire pipeline exists to compress the gap between an event happening in your life and an offer landing in your inbox, because that gap is the only window in which the offer works. The people who profit sit at every layer of the chain, not just the final one you notice. The courthouse or the postal service licenses the raw record. The aggregator, companies with names like Deluxe, Speedion, and Focus USA that most consumers will never encounter directly, cleans and packages the record into a sellable list, charging per name or per campaign. The bank, retailer, or funeral home at the end of the chain buys the list and reports. In its own marketing, that trigger-based campaigns outperform untargeted ones by roughly 200%. And one layer sits closer to home than most people assume. The bank you already use has an incentive to flag your own life events internally. Because industry estimates suggest roughly 3 out of every 4 people who switch their primary financial institution do so shortly after experiencing a major life event, which means your own bank is quietly watching your account activity for the same signals it would pay a broker to buy about a stranger. There is remarkably little standing in the way of any of this. Federal privacy law in the United States is sector-specific rather than comprehensive. Health records are protected, certain financial records are protected, but a change of address at FIDE-10 filing, a wedding registry sign-up, generally are not treated as sensitive personal data at all. The one notable exception is the funeral industry, where a decades-old Federal Trade Commission rule requires funeral homes to disclose itemized pricing before selling anything, specifically because regulators recognize that grief impairs the kind of price comparison that protects consumers everywhere else. No equivalent rule exists for movers, newlyweds, or new parents. Their vulnerability is just as real and considerably less protected. Here is the detail worth holding on to, because it will matter in a few minutes. The offer in Priya's mailbox was not sourced from a deed filing. She had not bought a house. She had signed a lease. It came from somewhere else in the chain, a source she had trusted with one small piece of information in the ordinary course of moving in, weeks before she thought to ask where a furniture company had gotten her name. Priya Malhotra is 34, a marketing operations manager earning $88,000 a year, single household. 3 weeks into a one-bedroom apartment she signed for, alone after a 6-year relationship ended. She is a composite drawn from aggregate consumer spending data, not one real household, but the pattern underneath her is real and repeats across thousands of households a year. Her emotional state, in the vocabulary she used with her therapist that month, was keeping busy to outrun the quiet. The apartment was too silent at night, and every purchase that made it feel more finished made the silence marginally more bearable, at least for an evening. Her rational decision, the one she made consciously in the leasing office, was to furnish slowly. She told her sister she would use a second-hand couch for a few months, wait for sales on anything permanent, keep the apartment sparse until her budget and her nerves settled. It was, by any conventional financial wisdom, the correct plan. Do not make major purchases in the emotional aftermath of a breakup. Wait until the decision-making is calm again. The offers arrived 9 days in. Not one, a sequence. A furniture store financing card with a $2,400 limit at 0% for 12 months. The fine print noting the rate reverts to 29.99% deferred interest on any remaining balance if the 12 months expire before the card is paid off. A welcome rate at a gym 6 blocks away. First month free, then $180 a month after. A grocery delivery service with a 1-month trial. Each offer alone was small enough to override her own plan without feeling like she was overriding anything. By week 5, she had used the furniture financing for a bed frame, a dresser, and a couch, $1,800 of the $2,400 limit. By week 8, she had spent roughly $6,800 furnishing and settling the apartment inside the $10,000 to $12,000 range that new movers spend nationally in their first 3 to 6 months, well ahead of the slow, deliberate pace she had promised herself in the leasing office. By the time she counted in the 7th week, 11 separate offers had arrived referencing her new address specifically, not her name generically. 4 were finance offers, 3 were subscription trials, 2 were insurance quotes. 1 was a locksmith flyer that, she later realized, had almost certainly come from the same lock rekeying service the leasing office required her to schedule the week she moved in, another small, ordinary transaction that had quietly become a data point. The moment of understanding did not come from a budgeting app or a friend's warning. It came from a customer service call about an unrelated billing error with her internet provider. The representative, reading from a script, mentioned that account activation data may be shared with marketing partners under the terms she had agreed to when she called to turn on service the week she moved in, a clause she had accepted verbally in under 10 seconds without reading anything. The furniture offer had not come from her lease. It had come from the phone call she made to get her lights on. She did not cancel the gym membership after she figured this out. She kept paying the $180 a month for 3 more months, going twice. When her sister asked why, she said canceling it would feel like admitting the apartment was not actually working out, that she was not actually building the life she had told everyone she was building. The financial decision and the identity decision had become the same decision, and she was not ready to make either one yet. Picture a composite household built from aggregate spending data rather than any single family, moving through the same calendar over the following 15 years. At 28, the household enters the roughly 2 million weddings that take place in the country each year, spending somewhere near the national average of $34,000 to $36,000. Much of it sourced from vendors who bought the couple's name off an engagement or registry list months before the wedding date. Part of a wedding industry now valued above $66 billion a year in core spending alone. At 31, the household becomes new parents, entering a baby products market valued near $358 billion globally, where 2-income households spend an average of roughly $23,380 a year raising a child in the early years. much of it driven by brand loyalty campaigns specifically timed to the narrow window before parents settle on trusted products. At 39 in this hypothetical, the marriage ends, and the household re-enters the trigger pipeline as a newly single, newly address-changed adult flagged for refinancing offers and credit products at precisely the moment their financial position is least stable. At 67, a parent dies, and the household spends inside a funeral industry that moves roughly $20 billion a year through an average bill of $8,000 to $10,000, arranged inside a single emotionally exhausting meeting where every add-on, the upgraded casket, the required vault, the printed programs, is priced and pitched at a moment almost perfectly engineered to prevent comparison shopping. The same architecture reaches further than these 5 events. Job loss triggers a wave of debt consolidation and personal loan offers within days of an unemployment claim becoming visible through changed spending patterns on a linked account. Retirement triggers annuity and long-term care insurance pitches. Timed to the exact quarter, a retirement account rollover becomes eligible. High school and college graduation trigger student loan refinancing offers before the first payment is even due. Each category has its own vendor ecosystem, its own aggregator, its own version of the same kind of response lift that make trigger data were worth buying in the first place. Layer them across a single lifetime, and the picture that emerges is not a series of independent marketing decisions. It is a standing industry built to greet you, specifically, at every threshold you cross, with an offer calibrated to the emotional register of that threshold rather than to your actual need. None of these events happen to the same person by accident of bad luck. They happen to nearly everyone in some order, which is precisely what makes the pipeline durable. It does not need to predict your specific life. It only needs a calendar broad enough to contain everyone's and enough data feeds to know which square you have just landed on. Redefine the term life event. You have been using it to mean a personal milestone, something that happens to you and your relationships, private in nature even when it is publicly celebrated. Inside the pipeline, a life event means something narrower and colder. A change in a public or semi-public record, a deed, a change of address, a registry entry, a billing account that can be detected, categorized, and monetized within days. Your wedding is a milestone to you. To the aggregator, it is a timestamp attached to a name. This changes what vulnerability means here. You have probably filed the mistakes, the furniture financing, the gym membership, the funeral upgrade, under the heading of poor impulse control. A personal failing to manage with more discipline next time. But discipline was never the variable being tested. You were making decisions inside a window engineered by people who had already calculated, using response rate data from millions of prior households, exactly how many days after your move, your wedding, or your loss, you would be most likely to say yes. The system does not need you to be undisciplined. It only needs you to be human during the specific week. It already knows you are most reactive. And this changes what your own steady judgment is actually worth. The belief you started with, that you are a deliberate buyer who decides on your own timeline, was not wrong most of the time. It was incomplete. Your timeline runs on ordinary weeks. The pipeline runs on trigger weeks, and it was built, funded, and refined for exactly the weeks your judgment is least equipped to handle, which is the only reason it survives being this well documented and still this effective. None of this requires a conspiracy, and it does not require anyone to have targeted you personally. It requires only a market broad enough that targeting everyone at their most reactive moment is, statistically, worth automating. Recognizing the calendar does not remove you from it. Your name will still move through deed records, change of address feeds, and registry databases for the rest of your life. What changes is smaller and more precise. You now know that the offer arriving 9 days after a life event is not a coincidence, a kindness, or a sign that you finally needed something. It is a scheduled response to a data point you generated without noticing you had generated it. They did not need to know Priya, her history, her heartbreak, or her plans. They only needed to know the date her lease started, and everything else followed on schedule. Think back to your own last major life event, the move, the wedding, the loss. Count the days before the first unsolicited offer landed in your inbox or your mailbox. Most people, once they actually count, are surprised how few days it took. Life event exploitation is systematic, not coincidental. The calendar of your financial vulnerability has been mapped and monetized.